Hi, welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. Today we're continuing the discussing of finding freedom in our recovery. I find that we can usually relate better to negative emotions than positive ones. Freedom also is a concept that also fluctuates due to the experience of the individual. And in recovery, it's no different. Today I have Rachel Kling joining in to share her insight, including a book she has written. Welcome, Rachel. Thank you for being a part of this and sharing your insight. I never minimize that. So
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's wonderful to be here.
I just want to tell those who are watching, they know that I always plug the suicide prevention Lifeline. If you are in crisis in the U.S., the number is 1-800-273-8255. But I encourage those who are listening around the world to find what's available in your area when it comes to resources. Rachel, a lot of times I start off with a quote, and today is no different, and it's from uh, Aung San Suu Kyi. I hope I said that right. I hope I didn't brutalize that name, but it says the only real prison is fear, and the only real freedom is freedom from fear. What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
I think that um, adversity, if we choose to learn from it rather
Mm-hmm.
than succumb to it, then we can
Mm-hmm.
really find freedom because it helps us understand ourselves. And we can recognize that we've faced our worst fears, especially for those of us who suffer as much as we do, who have struggled with mental health problems. We
Mm-hmm.
have faced our fears, and we can
Mm-hmm.
grow from that. And in
Mm-hmm.
growing from that, we can learn to know ourselves. And in knowing yourself and understanding yourself, that is where freedom truly lies, I believe.
Yeah, and I feel like, in most cases, sometimes fear and healing doesn't usually mix, but it's how we see it is the thing. It's like, I like what you're saying with the idea, because through our adversities, through our storms, through our uncertainty, all of us are facing in a global scale with the pandemic. It gives us an opportunity of insight on ourselves and where we're at. Rachel, I know you have a bit of a story in your journey of finding freedom in your recovery, and I want to give an opportunity for to share as much as you like with those listening. I understand that I never minimize this, and that's why this platform is a safe place. So, whatever you're willing to share, I'm sure everyone will enjoy your insight. So,
Well, I think it's interesting that this is about finding freedom in recovery because I started my life was so much about living in fear. I think
mm,
that's where that descent into my breakdown actually came. I was afraid all the time. I had
yeah,
trauma at home, I had trauma at school,
mm,
I was a child of a divorce, and I never felt like I belonged anywhere. I felt
yeah,
always on the outside, and when you're on the outside, you feel afraid because you're not
mm,
connected to anything, and it's a disconnection that really brings about fear. We help each other be safe. We support each other. I
mm.
loved that in your opening video. I saw people
Yeah,
supporting each other and
yeah,
recognizing that that's how we transcend fear is through
yeah.
our connection to one another, really. Which brings me to what facilitated my recovery, which is Aikido, which is what my book is
Mm,
about. And in
mm,
Aikido, we are facing fear because someone is coming at us with a pretty sincere attack, either a strike or a
mm-hmm,
punch or a
mm,
grab. And our job as Aikidoists is to look at that attack and look at
mm,
it from a place of compassion and say, how can I take this person's suffering? Because they would never attack me if they weren't suffering. How can I
mm-hmm,
take their suffering and fear
mm,
and redirect so that we have a connection of compassion? And so what
mm-hmm,
we have to do is we have to meet that attack with love. And
mm,
through our love, we connect and we redirect what was a contentious experience. To me, love is where freedom is. If fear
mm-hmm,
is what keeps us imprisoned, then love is
mm-hmm.
what frees us. And through finding love in Aikido is where I found my freedom.
I do. It's funny because I just remember, and when it comes to recovery and comes to finding freedom, a lot of times, from my personal experience, it's just Um, it's all the expectations we have, all this urgency, all this enoughness. When we're able to slow down, I did Brazilian jiu-jitsu a while, and I do like the idea that even though I may not be the strongest person against the person I'm going against, there's this kind of fluidity of this idea of hurt people, and then that's very apparent
Yeah.
nowadays.
Yes.
And I do like the idea of redirecting, because a lot of times, I'll just say this: if I'm so right, Rachel, what does that make everyone else so wrong? And for me, that doesn't conduce any healing. And I feel when it comes to fear and fear obviously is a prison, but like you said, love. But one thing that you did say in the very beginning was our connections. And I feel one thing that stood out to me was one of my friends was a social worker in New York City and working with the homeless community. And I mentioned this many times, those who are listening, but I think it's valid in what you were saying. The homeless guy finally has a house, has a place to live, and he says 30 years of being homeless in New York City, what was the hardest thing? And she was social work, so she's going through all her things, that checklists that she's used to trying to get, and not that they're not valid points, but he said no, loneliness. Loneliness was the hardest thing. And with that being said, you mentioned your book a little bit, and I want you to mention a little bit more, if you don't mind. Would you mind sharing what prompted you? And you kind of did, but more so, let's just go here. What would you hope readers will get out of reading your book? Obviously I like to help, the whole healing and recovery journey is different for everyone, but I do like the idea of finding different ways and having a holistic approach to it. So would you mind sharing what would your hope be for readers of your book? What would you get?
Thank you. Thanks. A couple of things. One is, I don't think we can have too many recovery stories. We need to inspire each other. We need to recognize that there's hope. We need to recognize that we can always find meaning. And so there were two things that drove me. And one was coming to terms with myself, really, and trying to understand my own healing, my own recovery. What was it about Aikido in particular that opened me up, that helped me find myself, that helped me find freedom, and that helped me heal and become a stronger person? Someone who really does feel that they belong and has something to offer. And the other thing I want to use that story to inspire people and to help people realize you can find a way to rebuild your life. You can find meaning in your life. You can find value in yourself, and you don't know what that might be. But it's, as you say, it's different for everyone, but there's something meaningful for everyone. There's something that everyone can find in their lives to help them find a reason to be alive, a reason to connect, a reason to be in the world and to belong. And also, importantly, to contribute. Because I think something that we all struggle with, those of us who have suffered from mental illness, we feel we don't have anything to contribute. We feel, why am I here? What am I doing here? I'm a burden on everybody. Right? I'm here to say no. Just your story is something to contribute. Just the fact that you are here to tell your story is something that you can contribute. And that's
I like how you mentioned value. For me, in my journey, that was a big part of it. It wasn't, and another thing that you mentioned was our stories. And I remember when I first started the podcast, I didn't know what I was doing. It was 2019 October, and for me, I always wanted to have a platform. I used to do it face to face, but I wanted to have a platform so people could share their stories. Eventually, I learned that my story wasn't everything, and it was kind of humbling because, like, even though my story is inspiring to some, it's everyone's stories, and that's the point. And like you're saying, is you can't get enough because there's a lot of months. Like May is Mental Health Month. There's Suicide Prevention Week. You look at the calendar; it's riddled with a lot of things that are marked up, and to obviously contribute awareness. There's reasons for that, sometimes resources, but more so finding what the importance of that is. You know, and a lot of times we get confused, but really it's about the people and the family is attached to it. That's why it matters. I want to talk about value. You know, we spoke about it, and all the information those who are listening about her book and how to find out will be in the notes at the end attached to this episode. But I want to go to this right here. Finding freedom, usually in my personal experience, deals a bit with value. I want to share in Viktor Emil Frankl. I read his book and I love what he. But besides that, he's an Austrian neurologist, psychiatrist, philosopher, author, and Holocaust survivor. If you ever never heard of him, he's a very inspiring story. But his quote is what inspired me. It says, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Choice is very personal and has been. It's really important in my recovery." What are your thoughts of this quote? I know I didn't really. I want to just throw it up there. When you read this, for me, it was very powerful because we don't put enough emphasis on choice and our attitude and how we see things, and that stems from our value, and that's where we're going to. So, anything you want to share when you read this?
Yeah, I think it's a really powerful quote. Since we're talking about mental illness and your audience, maybe people who struggle, I do want to acknowledge that sometimes people stuck in hopelessness, stuck in fear, don't feel they have choices.
Yeah.
And I want to acknowledge that that is a valuable and understandable experience that we need to recognize. And so as I have views about this quote and I want to share them, but I also want to shout out to anyone who's listening who's feeling that they don't have a choice and they don't know how to get out of their hopelessness, that's where we've all been, and that's okay. What I do want to say is that you don't have to stay there. You are not necessarily going to have to stay there.
Yeah.
And
it's like, go ahead. I just want to say it's okay to not be okay. The whole hashtag thing, it's okay to not be okay. Right. So go ahead.
I wanted to put that forth because this is very much from Viktor Frankl's book about how he survived the Holocaust and how he was able to emerge somewhat intact from such a horrific experience by saying, no, you are not going to get me down. I am the person here who decides upon my inner experience. You do not get to tell me who I am. And ultimately, the human spirit cannot be crushed. No matter how badly you feel, ultimately there is a you in there. There is a person in there who has life in them, who has something to contribute, who has the ability to love and be kind. And when you can get to that place, when the door opens just a crack, you recognize you have all these choices and you recognize who you are, how important you are, how much you have to offer to other people.
I do like that you mentioned, because there's seasons of recovery, and I know there's a lot of times with the support groups I facilitate. But on top of that, I do want to also piggyback on what you're saying is, I going back a little bit, I know with AA, people struggling with alcoholism and drug addiction. One thing that one person told me, I thought was very inspiring, your recovery can't be a bunch of shouldn'ts. I should not do that. It shouldn't. If it's a bunch of, I shouldn't drink this beer. If every day is that, it's not sustainable. And that's basically that's basically what her point was. She's like, if every day was me not drinking, it becomes bleak. It may be good. The height of your recovery. You stopping. This negative negative addiction may be good at first, but you know how that dies out after a while. It's having a purpose, and that's what we're talking about. Purpose-driven recovery. And I want to just share this. When my value was at the start was very low, my value was very low. My perception of my freedom diminishes at the same time. It's uniquely funny because the value didn't go anywhere, but my perception of it did. And like you said, a lot of people, my peers, they a lot of times feel like they are not able to contribute. And I would say, I encourage you to kind of find ways where you can, because Serving others, helping others had become my recovery. Sharing my story and allowing a platform for people to share is healing for me because it reminds me of a time. Maybe I don't have, like, if someone has a story, I will never say I know what you're feeling, but I know the emotions that you're talking about. I know sadness. I know loneliness. I know how it feels to be left out. I know how it feels to be a burden. And I feel that in itself can be healing in itself. Any thoughts? We're kind of trudging on, but I think these concepts are very vital, especially in my personal recovery and some of the and like we said, it's not just one thing; it's a multiple things together. So, anything you want to add?
I just want to kind of agree with you that finding self-value is the road to recovery. Finding self-value is finding freedom. Finding out who you are, recognizing that who you are is a good and worthwhile person. And that is where freedom is, because if you are living in that place of I'm worthy, you can't also be afraid at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? Those two things do not add up. They can't exist in the same space. I'm worthy. I'm a good person. I belong here. I can connect. I deserve to connect. I want to connect. Disconnection is what brings us fear. And so value as a person is not separate from our connection to other people. We have value. Everyone has value. We're not separate from each other. And understanding that, I think, is what brings us freedom.
Yeah, I feel like our connections matter more than we like to admit.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
at the same time, it can that journey of it is just, for me, it's a journey, and that's the point. And I feel like a lot of times society right now, we have GPS. What does it tell you to do? It tells you from point A to B. But one day I went with my wife and we just got in the car and she's like, "Where are we going?" I'm like, "I don't know." The open road mentality is gone, but man, it was freeing. Just driving for 30 minutes or so, following signs, going to a park. It was nice. A lot of times we don't put enough emphasis on value because this urgency. I remember when this whole COVID thing started, a lot of my peers will be like, "I'm watching the news, but I can't. I watch the news till 4 a.m." I'm like, "Well, you'll be the most informed sick person I know." I'm done. For me, it stems from fear, but a lot of times people are like, "Oh, some of my peers, some of my other friends are, they exercise, they run," and I try to do my part, but it's all together, as you know, mind and body's together. If you are feeling down, if your value is super low, you're not going to eat broccoli, you're not going to run because you don't feel like you deserve a healthy or loving or a life that is more beyond just the walls that you put around you. But with that being said, value is essential. And I want to share this one quote that was: "The major value in life is not what you get. The major value in life is what you become." I heard this one guy saying this. It's kind of funny. He says, "We're human beings, being, not human doings." So I feel it's pretty funny how he mentions it that way. But becoming and being, I feel, is vital in recovery because it promotes this journey versus just doing and achieving. I feel we gained a lot of value. I'm going to ask you this question right now. How has value played a part in your recovery during adversity? I know you kind of answered that, but just any more insight as we kind of, I don't know, wrap things along to this topic of adversity.
It's interesting because what comes to mind actually is a scene in my book where I'm training to achieve my black belt, which was a long, hard process. Training for a year to become black belt was very much a healing process.
Yeah.
And I just lost it one day and I didn't think I could do it. And I said, "Sensei, I can't do this. I don't know what to do. I want to quit." And he said that Shodan, which is what we call black belt in Aikido, is about how you conduct yourself in the world.
Yeah.
It's about who you decide to be. And yes, it's about good technique, and you have to train
Yeah.
hard, and you're a
Mm-hmm.
martial artist. So, you know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
you have to know your technique, but that ultimately it's not about that. It's about who you are going to be in the world. It's about being a good person and being a compassionate person. But not only that, really projecting yourself into the world, really being out there so that you can help other people
Yeah.
and kind of have a natural compassion. But compassion is not it's not something that you don't act on. It's something that you
Mm.
engages you with other people,
Mm.
forces
Mm.
you're connecting with others, you're engaging with others. It's not about, oh, I have compassion for you. It's about, let's be in this world together. I'm in it with you, you're in it with me, and we're going to rise together and inspire ourselves and each other to this place of healing, this place of contributing, this place of being together and alive in the world.
I wasn't. I was just when you were talking, I was thinking of Rachel Naomi Remen. I've been using her quotes a bit. This is an old one I haven't used for a while. It says the most basic and powerful way to connect with another person is to listen.
Yeah.
Just listen. Perhaps the most important thing we ever give each other is our attention. A loving silence often has far more power to heal and to connect than the most well-intentioned words. A lot of us just we being present with someone, like making them feel like they're the only ones in the room, is an amazing skill that sometimes, unfortunately, is being lost. We have a lot of urgency to do a lot of things, but not be a certain or become something, because we kind of sometimes, at least from my experience, we do these things and we have this false sense of security that this certainty of achieving this degree of doing will promote happiness, but it doesn't work that way. It's like a lot of times life is just a journey itself. Some days are good, some days are bad. But like in the principal support in NAMI, one of the things I liked is that I don't know. I tell my peers, I'm like, yeah, there's principal support so we can support each other effectively in the group. But I dare to say, a lot of people have a struggle in supporting one another. We don't know how to support each other a lot of times, and what I think that is very telling. But at the same time, is very encouraging that um, um, to see like that my life, my living through recovery versus my maintaining through recovery is different. I'm not saying that there are certain moments that I may need to maintain, but I think living is personal to the person himself, what their aspiration, what their purpose, what their goals are. But at the same time, it's a journey. And I feel that fluidity, understand that you may make mistakes and that's okay. It doesn't diminish. It's like if I attach everything, all my value on everything, on things to obtain, the chances of me being disappointed and my value sinking is high because the one constant in life is change. And I feel that I think going back to what we talked about, what I mentioned before about Viktor Frankl and his quote is very significant because one, our choices and our attitude, but a lot of times in recovery we feel like we are blocked. But I want to go ahead and say thank you, Rachel, for agreeing to be a guest. I want to ask for your final thoughts when it comes to the book. All that information to those listening will be in the notes, but any final thoughts you want to share with those listening as we wrap up today?
I just want people to remember to value themselves. I want people
Yeah.
to remember that they're worth something, that they have
Mm.
something to offer, and that you can always rebuild your life around an
Yeah.
endeavor or a purpose. And if you don't feel that you have one, you
Hmm.
can you can persevere. Just keep
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
and recognize that you are a good person, and there are people out there who value you. Even if you can't experience yourself, look
Mm.
around and look in the eyes of people who care about you and
Mm.
recognize, I'm okay, even if I don't feel okay. And there are
Mm.
people, even if it doesn't feel that way, there are people around you who
Mm.
care. And you can look at them and say, okay, I have value as a person. So
Mm.
that's what I want to share with people, is to remember your worth.
Yeah. You know, a few months ago was Martin Luther King Jr. The day, and There's one quote wasn't gonna put it in here, but I think we just went that way, and it's so inspiring because it relates to anyone who's been in a situation that I might even put it on the screen. Let me just since it's just one of those quotes that really stick to me, I'm going to share with it right now. Give me a second. Here we go. Martin Luther King Jr. I love this quote. I'm just going to share. It says, "If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward." It's inspiring because anyone who's been in adversity understands this quote. Everyone knows that sometimes you just have to crawl. Some days are not these big, courageous days that you battle and you win. Some days it's just, it didn't work out today, and let me try again tomorrow. I just want to say thank you again, Rachel, for coming in and sharing your insight. I want to share with those who are listening. Remember that you can stay updated with all things Revive Ministries, the various platforms. ReviveMinistryFL.com is our website. This is goodbye from Revive Ministry Podcast, leaving you with this last quote. And it's from Neil Strauss. And it says, "People go through so much pain trying to avoid pain."